Joonas Korpisalo was not great, but the Bruins came out flat overall against the Florida Panthers and perhaps had their heads in the wrong space in that season opening loss.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things spoke to be. Today is Wednesday, October 9th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Speaking of firsts, it was Boston's first regular season game last night. An incredibly disappointing 6-4 loss to the Florida Panthers. Going to break down the storylines, stats, and signals from this one. Before we get into that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at LockedNHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. All right, the story last night, if I can describe the game in one word, it was flat. The Bruins came out extremely flat in this one, and were down 4-1 before you could even settle into your couch. Maybe not that quick, but you understand what I'm saying. It was kind of a situation where the Bruins were wildly outshot to begin the game. I believe it was 12-1 at one point. The shots on goal. The Panthers got a couple quick ones, and the Bruins just could not recover. And while they did make it a bit more interesting by bringing it to 6-4, the damage had already been done at that point. Yes, you can pin the game on Joonas Korpisalo, who was not good, allowing 2 goals within the first 7.5 minutes of the game. The Bruins tried to make it interesting by Pavel Zacha scoring a shorthanded goal, but by the end of the first, 2 more goals in the span of the final 1 minute and 26 seconds, including a shorthanded goal allowed by the Bruins. It was pretty much out of hand at that point. And the Bruins just could not get back into it. Joonas Korpisalo, again, was not great. And it's very easy to pin this game on him. But the Bruins as a whole did not bring their best to their regular season opener. Jim Montgomery, the head coach, acknowledged the Bruins weren't good in so many areas. And he highlighted Florida's execution. Boston's was really poor. They looked slow the entire game, not just the first 10 minutes, in his opinion. They could have reloaded better. They could have had the third forward on the strong side better. Should have read the rush better. All these things the Bruins could have done better in his estimation. There was that stat going around before the game via Sportsnet about how the Bruins are the biggest and heaviest team in the NHL this season. And that was all after we heard Don Sweeney to begin the offseason say they were going to prioritize team speed. It just did not happen. The Bruins did look slow. They were outplayed. They were outmatched by the defending Stanley Cup champion. And of course, it did not help that Korpisalo was in net. Talked all summer long about how the Bruins no longer have the luxury of elite level goaltending in every game. Jeremy Swayman's going to have to come in and play like 60 games here for the Boston Bruins to get that. Joonas Korpisalo, all credit to him. He came into training camp, did all the right things, said all the right things, but he's just not it. And the Bruins committing $3 million to this guy over the course of the next 4 seasons, that's probably something they're going to want to get out of and soon. But again, this was not all on him by any stretch of the imagination. The Boston Bruins were outshot in this one, as was a trend, and they were outshot early and often to begin this one. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, maybe it was the banner raising ceremony that cooled them down after the warm-ups. Maybe it was focusing on the wrong things. And Trent Frederick even admitted afterwards that maybe his mind wasn't in the greatest place for the first game of a hockey season. There was all these residual emotions from the playoff series. Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk, they get under the Bruins' skin. The Bruins, to their credit, did keep pushing back. They brought it to within 2 goals, but they just ran out of time. It was too little, too late. The Bruins will play the Panthers again on Monday, so there's another chance to kind of measure up to the Stanley Cup champions. But Frederick, yeah, he said that there was an instance where he was getting into it with Matthew Tkachuk. Tkachuk said, yeah, let's go. He didn't. It was hard for him when someone says, he actually asked him to fight, but he didn't. It's hard to read that. Basically, Steve Conroy of the Boston Herald asked if he thought Tkachuk was trying to sucker him into dropping the gloves, and maybe that was it. Disrespectful to the game, Frederick thought. And that's kind of where their mindset was. Some payback for the playoff loss, some retribution for the injury to Brad Marchand in the playoffs last year, just not wanting to be pushed around by this team anymore, wanting to stack up to get them to answer the call. And the Panthers pulled it off beautifully. They baited the Bruins into getting, and the Bruins just could not find their groove last night. Yes, a big part of it was those goals that were let in by Korpisalo. It's incredibly deflating to a team to get behind 4-1 after one period. But it's not as if they were really helping him out, allowing 17 shots in the first period, 17-12. The Bruins did manage to muster some shots on Sergei Bobrovsky. They were outshot again in the second period, had an 11-10 advantage in the third, but overall were outshot, out-attempted, and we'll get into that here as we look at the stats. So the big storyline last night, yes, Korpisalo was not great, and they need Swayman to get up to speed so that he can start tomorrow night's game against the Montreal Canadiens. But overall, the Bruins came out flat, and Trent Frederick even admitted that his mind may have not been in the right place. The rest of the Bruins showed up too late, and you can see that in some of these key stats that we'll look at here as the podcast continues. Gametime is one of my favorite apps to scroll through because there are so many amazing deals for tickets for sports, comedy, theater, concerts near me, and constantly scrolling, dreaming about the next concert or a hockey game that I want to attend. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love the panoramic view from your seat. You know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today because what time is it? It's game time. Following the Linus Ullmark trade, I heard time and time again that it did not matter who was in net for the Boston Bruins because their team defense was able to absorb any goaltender performance in there. And I tried to say time and time again that that was not the case last season. The Boston Bruins overall team defense was not great. They constantly allowed the opposition to outshoot them, to out-attempt them, generate high danger opportunities. Well, the Bruins were kind of good at pushing those out, but expected goals overall were in the opposition's favor. What kept the Bruins afloat was deploying Ullmark and Swayman back-to-back, or rotating each and every night, and getting elite level goaltending. You're not going to get that from Joonas Korpisalo. And we saw that last night, compounded with Boston's defensive deficiencies. It resulted in this 6-4 score that looked a bit better because the Bruins were able to score a couple goals late in the game to make it a bit more respectable. But overall, the stats weren't great. And I'll bring up the natural stat trick slides here so that you can see exactly what I am talking about. If you look at Corsi, so that is shot attempts, 5-on-5, the Panthers had a 53-33 advantage. All right. That results in 61.6% of all the shots attempted in this game at 5-on-5 were in favor of the Florida Panthers. Shots at 5-on-5, 27-15, a 64.3 advantage for the Panthers at 5-on-5. Scoring chances, 30-18, a 62.5% advantage, 16-7. The high danger chances, that's a 69.6% advantage for the Florida Panthers. That's not great. If you look at all situations, still not great for the Boston Bruins. Now, thankfully, the Bruins penalty kill was on point last night as the Panthers were held to 0 for 6 on the power play. If they had connected on a couple of those goals, it could have been even uglier. In all situations, 58.6 shot attempts in favor of the Panthers, 55.6 in favor of the Panthers in terms of shots, high danger chances, scoring chances, even more in favor of Florida. So again, while Korpisalo was not great, the reality is the team in front of him was not very good either. They came out extremely flat and did their new goaltender no favors at all. Again, thankfully, Florida went 0 for 6 on the power play. Boston went 1 for 4. They got that late power play goal thanks to David Pastrnak, his first of the season. But again, it was too little too late. 2 goals scored in the final 3 minutes and 9 seconds to bring it back to respectability, the score. But it didn't matter at that point. So those are the key stats. And we're going to look at those game in and game out to see if that improves over time. But to begin, not stellar for the Bruins. They were led in shots by their best player. That was David Pastrnak. 5 shots on goal. He had the power play goal. 19 minutes and 31 seconds of ice time, which was second among all forwards behind Pavel Zacha, who did have a strong game as well. He had a goal early on in the game, which was a shorthanded goal. The leader in ice time for this team was Charlie McAvoy, of course. He had a goal and an assist, 2 points. Your best players have to be your best players each and every night. McAvoy, Pastrnak certainly were 2 of the better players for the Bruins. Now, I'm not a huge proponent of the plus-minus stat, but there was one guy who really stood out in terms of plus-minus last night, and it was Mason Lohrei, who finished with a -3. You, of course, can't just focus on plus-minus. You have to look at the kind of individual and on-ice stats, not just goals. When you look at Mason Lohrei last night, he was on the ice for 8 attempts generated by the Bruins, 18 generated by the Panthers for a 30.77. So he was fighting it all night long, and not the best showing for a guy who's being called upon to take a next step for the Boston Bruins. Other key stats, of course, Korpisalo, an .829 save percentage in this one. 6 goals on 35 shots. That's not going to get it done. And it was very reminiscent of the performance that he put in last season for the Ottawa Senators, which was in large part what kept Ottawa out of the playoff picture last season. Wasn't just him, but he did play 55 games for Ottawa last season, and the Senators were not the greatest defensive team, but neither were the Bruins. That's a bit of a myth that people are propagating. Pavel Zacha had 3 shots on goal, as did John Beecher. Brandon Carlo had 4 shots on goal from the back end, but also a -2, and was a 27% player when it came to shot attempt differential last night at 5-on-5. So the Bruins looked slow. They were just outmatched by a better team. And part of the problem is the Bruins kind of have one top line and then like 2 fourth lines, maybe half a third line in there. We'll talk about that coming up when we look at the signals to take away from this game. But overall, the Bruins just did not look great. And Max Jones making his Bruins regular season debut, less than 10 minutes of time on ice at 5-on-5, on the ice for 4 shot attempts generated, 17 against, a 19.05 shot attempt differential while he was on the ice. Shot differential 11-1. He's not the only guy who was on the ice for many against. That whole third line of Trent Frederick, Justin Brazeau, Max Jones, they really got caved last night when it came to shot attempts and shots generated. And that trio may need a shakeup moving forward. We'll talk about some of the takeaways, signals, trends that we can move forward with here coming up as the podcast continues. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and for good reason. They are currently offering a pretty spectacular deal where you can put down $5 on anything and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Maybe after last night, you're thinking 97.5 points over under for the Boston Bruins. Maybe we'll take the under on that. Put $5 down and you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, no matter what the outcome of that $5 bet is. So if you're watching the games, you get a hunch in the middle of it, check the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play on the app. So much more is available in the same area where you place your bet. So you can get the best possible information to make informed decisions with that $200 bonus. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to get in on the action. Start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Now, unfortunately, last night, Matt Poitras was not able to go. He's day-to-day with an injury. Tyler Johnson remains with the team. He did not travel to Florida, though, and perhaps he's getting the Danton Heinen treatment as the Bruins. Oh, dear. Here we go. I'm just looking at X Twitter right now, and Linus Ullmark signing a contract extension with the Ottawa Senators, 4 years, $8.25 million per season, the exact same cap hit that Jeremy Swayman will carry for the next 4 seasons. So even before Linus Ullmark makes his regular season debut for the Senators, even before Jeremy Swayman makes his first start for the Bruins with this new contract, they have matching AAVs here and will be division rivals for the next 4 seasons. at the very least, which is very interesting, and definitely, obviously, the Bruins could not have afforded both of these guys moving forward. Both of them wanted to be the man, playing at least 55 games per season. Those opportunities weren't available on the same team. Ullmark now signing for 4 years, which makes sense. He's a bit older than Swayman, a bit more advanced in his career, and signing that contract extension with the Ottawa Senators, which will kick in at the beginning of next season. All right, back to the black and gold. And what can we take away from last night's season opener? Well, Korpisalo is a true backup and should not be in the lineup more often than necessary. The Bruins also need they need Matt Poitras to get healthy and back into the lineup. They also need to shake up the current lineup. As I said earlier, when I looked at the lineup last night, Max Jones, Justin Brazeau on the third line, I had those guys penciled in to be on the fourth line at best, maybe Brazeau rotating in and out as the 13th forward. Beecher, Kastelic I had on the fourth line as well. Cole Koepke not on the roster at all. The Bruins have arguably 4 top 6 forwards at the moment. Charlie Coyle, Morgan Geekie, perhaps best suited on the third line, with, of course, Zacha, Lindholm, Pastrnak as your number one line, a bona fide number one line. Brad Marchand, still a top 6 forward. But then you have 2 fourth lines here, 2/3 of a third line playing on the second line. The Bruins are going to struggle to score this season. And they need more speed and skill in the lineup. Whether that's Matt Poitras coming back from injury, whether that's Tyler Johnson getting a contract, whether it's the promotion of Fabian Lysell after he hopefully gets a strong start in the AHL. Ideally, you have that top line. You have Marchand, Coyle. Yeah, maybe Geekie stays there, but then maybe Frederick, Lysell, Johnson, or I don't know. I don't know what the exact mix is. Max Jones had a rough debut for the Boston Bruins. Maybe Geekie, Frederick, Johnson would be a better third line with Marchand, Coyle, and Lysell. Put them up there. The Bruins need that skill. They need that speed, and boasting about having the biggest lineup, the heaviest lineup in the NHL. I mean, that's great if it makes you harder to play against. And the Panthers had a pretty easy time of it last night. It is just one game of 82 or 83 in Brett Ritchie's NHL. You have to give Lindholm, Zadorov some time to get acclimated to regular season play with this new team. Even Korpisalo to a certain degree. You have to remember Linus Ullmark did not have the strongest start to his Bruins tenure, and look what became of him. Now, I'm not saying that he's on the same level, Korpisalo, as an Ullmark, but it still takes time to get used to a new system, a new city, a new team. And he hasn't really had a lot of time to get to know Swayman either, since Swayman really wasn't a part of training camp. But I really hope to see some lineup changes for tomorrow night's game. I would like to see Tyler Johnson signed. He's advanced in his career. Not the fastest guy, but we saw that skill that he has, that scoring ability. He scored 17 goals last season for the Chicago Blackhawks, and not in a prime role by any means. It's not as if he was riding shotgun with Connor Bedard and benefiting from that rookie phenom. He was playing with lesser lights in Chicago and still managed 17 goals with a very bad Blackhawks team. Get him in the lineup. Hopefully Poitras can get back soon. And that top line, Marchand, Coyle, Poitras, I'd go with Frederick, Geekie, Johnson, and then maybe Jones, Beecher, Kastelic. That's my maybe ideal lineup at the moment. Maybe get Riley Tufte in there to spell Cole Koepke at the very least if you're not going to make any other changes up front. But the key takeaways from this game are it was just one of 82. The Bruins, they have a much tougher schedule to begin the season. Montreal's coming in tomorrow night. They're improved. They play the Kings on Saturday, the Panthers again on Monday. Last year, they had a pretty cakey start as they did the season before. They don't have that 1-2 to rotate in net anymore. And they're going to have to figure things out soon. Again, don't forget, Jim Montgomery is without a contract extension for the next season. So if things get off to a really rough start here, who knows what will happen. There could be some questions about his tenure with the team. I think he deserves another at least playoff run, but we'll see. Good for Linus Ullmark. Get Jeremy Swayman in there for tomorrow night, and we'll see where we go. Very disappointing start for the Bruins last night, but it's just one of 82. They came out flat, perhaps iced by that banner raising. Their focus was off. They were thinking of beating the Panthers, like physically, literally, and not beating them on the ice. Defensive issues persist. It was the same situation we saw in the playoffs last year. A big moment, the Bruins come out flat, wildly outshot to begin the game, behind. They play well over the a 5-10 minute stretch to make it a bit more respectable, but there's still some work to do for this group. There are a lot of new faces, so we have to give them a bit of a grace period here as they all begin to work together. There were so many different bodies at training camp. Now that the roster's narrowed down, I'd like to see a couple changes for the lineup for tomorrow night. But of course, we'll preview that game on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, bringing you all the latest on the black and gold, because that's what we do here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Be sure to check out the Locked On Fantasy Podcast next as Steal and Flip give you all the expert advice you need to win your league this year. I picked up Barrett Hayton in mine as a sleeper pick, a goal assist last night. Chef's kiss. Love to see it. Good for Utah for winning their first game. All right, have a great Wednesday, friends. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.